Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Philip.
Hi, my name's Philip. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Jeff for asking me to speak. First of all, I come from Scotland. In case you think maybe I've had a stroke or something, this is what we talk like there. I come from Glasgow, which is a big city in Scotland. If you imagine, it's kind of like Detroit, if Detroit was hit directly by some kind of nuclear weapon. And it's quite a tough city, and I'm one of 4 children. I come from an Irish Catholic background, and I didn't plan on becoming an alcoholic, you know. I didn't go to the careers advisor when I was at school and say, I'm thinking about being an alcoholic. Do you know how I could become an alcoholic? You know, I was one of the smart kids at school. I did well at school, and you know, I thought maybe if I started to become an alcoholic, I would probably realize in time and get out of the way. You know, I started drinking in my teens. I was about 14, I think, really 15, and you know, I wanted to try it to see what it was like, and so I did, and I really liked it. I really liked it. It made me feel great. It made me feel not scared, and I think I had been very afraid for a long time, and so when I discovered alcohol, it came as a big relief to me. You know, I really loved how I felt when I drank, and my parents were very fearful people, and they didn't drink, and they weren't a lot of fun, and you know, when I started drinking, it was about the time that puberty was really kicking in, and I couldn't really cope with puberty. I had no one to talk to about what seemed to be going on. You know, I was in this very religious family, and it was kind of, you know, just go to church all the time and don't think about girls, and all I could think about was girls, you know, and so when I drank, you know, it kind of enabled me to do some of the things that I'd wanted to do, but I couldn't sort of, I couldn't muster up the courage, like going out with girls or asking someone to dance and all that kind of thing. And so alcohol seemed to free me up in the beginning. It seemed to give me courage. It seemed to enable me to connect with people, you know. And I didn't think it was doing me any harm. You know, I didn't think that it would become a problem. I just didn't think about it too much at all. I didn't think alcohol was a drug. I thought it was a type of food, really. Kind of thought of it as a sort of food, you know. And if you slept, then the next day you could start again, you know. I didn't really consider that you could become addicted to it. I mean, they wouldn't sell it everywhere so freely if it was dangerous, surely. I thought to myself, you know. And so I was very naive when it came to alcohol. And oddly enough, my family, my extended family had a lot of alcoholics in it. You know, I had a lot of uncles that you didn't answer the door to. And I think my parents my parents were sort of watching to see who would become an alcoholic out of the four of us, you know. And I didn't disappoint them, you know. But I would like to emphasize that I didn't know I was an alcoholic until after I got here. You know, my denial was very strong and very resilient, and I always felt that if there was a problem, it wasn't in the alcohol. It was, I went out of the house too early in the evening, or I shouldn't have combined that drug with this other drug, or the Glasgow police really seemed to hate me. I was always blaming other circumstances. I got into bad company, or I had all these different things. But the first night I drank was great. I want to say that the first night I drank was great, and I woke up the next day and I was delighted. And then the next night I drank, it wasn't so good, and I was trying to make it like the first night that I drank. And then the third night that I drank, it wasn't as good as the first night or the second night, and I kept trying to get that first night back again, and I never seemed to really manage to do that, the feeling I had when I drank was a little bit like the analogy I would use is being on a bus. I know if you're from Los Angeles, you might not know what that is, but if you're on a bus and the bus goes past your stop, that was the feeling I had when I drank. I was either not drunk enough or else too drunk, That was how my drinking always went. It went like this: not drunk enough, not drunk enough, not drunk enough, too drunk, too drunk, too drunk. And the stop, there was a stop, there had been a stop. I felt there had been a stop that was drunk enough. But they seemed to have taken the temporary drunk enough stop and removed it, And this was a problem. This was a problem. And I felt that I should be able to find a way of just being drunk enough. I should be able to get that back again, Maybe, as I say, I had all these different little things, like maybe take less money out of the house with me, and leave later. Someone said if you have cheese before you go out, cheese apparently has some kind of magical properties. Now I'm not a doctor, but apparently cheese, it has some kind of sponge-like quality, and it soaks up the toxins and alcohol. I don't know. Somebody did say that. You need to have some cheese to... All that happened when I ate cheese was when I threw up, there was cheese. That was all that happened. But I put a lot of hope in this cheese theory when I heard it. I went home happy, thinking I'm cheese deficient, and I've cracked it now with the cheese, So I'm drinking. It's a terrible mess. I don't really see it. Everyone else is getting rather upset. My family are not happy. I'm stealing from my family. They don't like that. I don't steal from people who are not in my family because they might go to the police. I steal from my family. It's the compassionate thing to do. I don't consider it stealing. I consider it a sort of a loan, and maybe I'll give them it back, but I never do. And I don't want to think too much about that. And my mother's going to bed with all these purses. She goes up to a room with 3 purses, and I'm looking at her with the purses thinking, fuck me, it's no wonder I drink with this crazy family of mine, with a religion and going to bed with the purses. And I haven't connected up in my mind the fact that she has to take the purses to her room at night and the fact that I'm stealing. I just don't connect the two up. I just think, oh, this is a mad family, And really, the people closest to me were the people that I hurt most, The people who loved me were very badly burned. The people who didn't know me so well thought I was great fun and a laugh. And eventually the day came when I was asked to leave the house, I came home from a bender. I'd been missing for days. I came home and there were suitcases in the hall. And I said to my younger sister, "Who's visiting?" And she said, "You are," which was nice. And so I was asked to leave the home, and I'd sort of managed to weasel my way back in. And the next time I was kicked out of the house, I came home and there were trash bags there instead of suitcases, So they were really getting sick of it, I was studying to become a lawyer. I was at law school, and the only court appearance I made was as the accused when I turned up in a criminal court in Glasgow for stealing cars. And they don't like that if you're studying to be a lawyer, apparently. I found that out because I told lots of people, and some of them turned up to the trial thinking it would be a sort of, a fun event, And then they asked me to leave the law school because of the stealing of the cars and other things, that I won't go into. So I sort of didn't try to set a building on fire, to be fair. What I did was I burned a poster in a basement to see how it would burn. When you're a little bit drunk and a little bit stoned and you think, I wonder how that would burn, They don't like it when you do that, in law school, they don't like that, yeah. So anyway, I'm out of law school. I'll try and get to my onto the recovery eventually. Every job I had, I was in trouble. I was either fired or encouraged to resign, or politely told, it's not working out. However they do that, there's different ways they do that. Usually they say, "Do you have a minute?" Usually they say, "Do you have a minute, Philip?" And even now, if someone says that to me at work, and I've been sober quite a long time, I still think, "Oh God, they've found out," And when I wasn't drunk, I spent a lot of time waiting for, it was a little bit like when you knock something over and it hasn't hit the ground yet. I had that sort of, waiting for something to hit the ground feeling, I had lots of different jobs, part-time jobs. I worked in bars. I worked in hotels in the south of England. And I couldn't do jobs. I couldn't work. I had problems with authority. I felt it was because of my politics. I was, at that time, some kind of slightly confused anarchist / I don't know what else, communist. I had a lot of problems with authority anyway, and I felt people picked on me because of my politics. But they actually picked on me because I was employed by them and I was stealing from them. That makes people pick on you. And so fired from lots of jobs, kicked out of law school, homeless. Now, I didn't think of myself as homeless when I became homeless. I was staying on people's sofas, and I would meet a girl at a nightclub, and she would say, maybe she would say, "Will you come in for a coffee?" And I would say, "I'll go and get my suitcases," And then a few weeks later, she would say, "You really have to leave now, I would be living in people's houses, and it's very hard to sort of blend in when you're 6'5". It's very hard to not be noticed, And that was a horrible feeling, being the only guy not paying rent somewhere, and people are saying, "Why is there no toilet paper, and who took the last of the milk?" And you're just kind of hanging around there, like Gollum, sort of in the corner, hoping someone else will be blamed for taking the toilet paper and the milk and not paying rent, and I don't know, on and on. So my life wasn't very successful at this point. If I'm not making that clear, I'm homeless, I can't hold down a job, I'm kicked out of law school, and every now and then I go back to the parents and I say, let's start again. Maybe do a bit of crying. I could cry at will at that point, like a sort of, and I would go to church and I would say, and quite often I sort of meant it at the time, but I could never sustain any enthusiasm for sobriety, until I got here, I would be sober for a little while and then I would start to get kind of a little bit sort of squirrely, a little bit itchy and a little bit restless. And I would think, maybe if I just watch myself, I'll be okay. Maybe if I just have some wine, smoke some dope first, just take it easy, and then we'd be away again, all fucking crazy again, When I started drinking, I meant to maybe only drink a little bit, but after about 2 drinks, I thought, what's the point in trying to control your drinking? Fuck that. I'd be gone again, I'd be gone again. So the last few months of my drinking, I was living in Madrid, in Spain. I was teaching in a school. I was teaching English, in fact, in a school in the north of Madrid, and this was, by this point I really was in a very bad way. I was called in by my employer, and he sat me down and he said, "Do you have a minute?" and we sat down and he said to me, "So Philip, where are you living at this apartment that you're in?" He said to me, "Do you have washing facilities in this apartment you have?" Now, I thought he was making conversation, He was a guy from New Zealand, and he wasn't particularly friendly. But I thought he just wants to chat, It seemed like an odd way to open a bit of, kind of small talk. But he was somehow taking an interest in my the white goods in my apartment. So he said to me, "Do you have a washing machine where you are?" I said, "Oh yeah, I've got all mod cons there." And he said to me, "And a bath. Do you have a bath where you are?" And I was thinking, I'm not sure where he's going with this, but I said, "Yeah, I've got a bath." And then there was an uncomfortable few seconds of silence, and he said, "Well, why don't you use them?" And I had to think about this. What's he saying here? What's he really saying, What's the subtext here? So I'm teaching in this, it's like the sort of Brentwoods of very nice part of Madrid. I'm teaching in this private school, and I haven't been washing my clothes. I've been going to bed in 2 T-shirts and waking up and going to work in the same 2 T-shirts for perhaps 5 or 6 days. I'm thinking it'll do for another day, I don't really get round to having a bath or having a shower because I'm drunk or stoned all the time. And so what happens over time is that you get a bit smelly. And I didn't even feel offended when the guy told me. I just thought, oh, fair enough, And maybe I didn't even remember a shower, So this was my drinking. Towards the end, I couldn't sleep by the end. Maybe if I was lucky, I would get the right combination of alcohol and drugs, and I would sort of lose consciousness for a little while, but I couldn't really sleep properly, I was just so frightened. And then if I did sleep, I would have these terrible nightmares about my own death. And when I woke up, I would hear music, and it was music that no one else could hear. It was only me could hear that music, And I didn't think I'd better see a doctor. I'm hearing music in my head. I just thought, oh, there's the music, I sort of just got used to it, I was acutely paranoid. If I was walking down the road and a car stopped, I thought people were going to jump me. And I was teaching English. I wasn't in the special forces. I wasn't a spy. There was no sensible reason why I had enemies who wished to do me sudden harm. But I really felt that they were out there and they were after me and they were coming to get me. And you couldn't be too careful. I was triple locking the door. And, I was just really paranoid. I couldn't even go out anymore. I mean, at one time I would drink and go out and chase girls and have fun. And by now I'm just drinking at home in front of the television. And, this is Spanish television in the early 80s, which is mostly It's kind of like Lassie Come Home dubbed into Spanish, you know. So I'm sitting there crying when Lassie comes back at the end and singing along with Spanish shampoo commercials, you know. It's very glamorous. I think you'll agree. And so this is how narrow my life became. I was just this guy in a room with a bottle of wine and the shampoo commercials, singing along, and thinking about killing myself quite a lot, more and more thinking about killing myself. So this is where my life is when I go back to Scotland, Christmas 1982, for a holiday. You know, I've got a return ticket. Now, I'm just holding on to the job and no more. I'm just holding on to the apartment and no more. But I go back and I go out with these friends of mine who I'd known from law school, and they'd managed to qualify as lawyers. And so we all went out and got drunk, and we ended up in this room where one of them lived. And I got drunk that night, as usual, and I made a pass at this woman who on my left in this room, and we'd slept together once before, some years ago, and she wasn't keen to repeat the experience. And not deterred in the least by this, I had a crack at this other woman who was on the other side, it was the same like a big bed we'd all crashed in, and she was a gay woman, but I thought maybe she might change her mind, you know. Maybe the whole gay thing wasn't working out, and it's always worth a try, you know. So I made the pass at the gay woman. She was also not keen, and there was something about that moment when you're lying there between two people and you've made the pass at both of them, and you know the failed pass number one can hear failed pass number two, you know. And then in the morning I had to borrow money from them to go home, you know. You know, it was kind of depressing, you know, particularly because that was just like a Tuesday. That wasn't even, you know, and it was a Monday, actually. So that next day, I go to the bar on my own, and I have some beer and some wine. And then I do something that I didn't know where it came from. I phoned this guy who I knew who was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, he'd gotten sober a few years earlier, and the people that I drank with and took drugs with, it came up in conversation in the bar that he'd gone to AA. And the way it was described by these people, it was a little bit along the lines of, he's had a colostomy bag fitted to him, you know. It was sort of, people were a little embarrassed, and will not dwell on it, and they felt sorry for him. And we kind of felt he was a pussy, really, you know. He's gone to AA, you know. He couldn't hack it, you know. He's kind of a pussy, you know. We'll not talk about it too much, but he's gone to that AA, you know. Yeah, whose round is it, you know? And so this guy who I felt sorry for, who'd gone to AA, I got friendly with him, and I called him this day, you know, when I came out of the bar, and I phoned him up, and I said, I'm back, I'm here, what's going on? And I said to him, I think I might have a bit of a drink problem, you know? And I'd like to emphasize that. I said, I think I might have a bit of a drink problem. I didn't say, I'm a fucking raging alcoholic. I said, I think I might have a bit of a drink problem. Can I come and see you, you know? And so I went to see this guy. I got on the bus, and I sat down with him. And then there was someone else there, you know. I wanted this other guy to leave so I could talk about my bit of a drink problem with this person who was sober. And the other guy left, and it was getting late, and we started talking. And I said to him, look, you know, I've been getting drunk, and I've been doing some crazy stuff. Like I smashed up this bar one night, and, you know, I'm just doing a lot of weird stuff. I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know what's going on. You know, and he started to fill in the gaps in what I was telling him. And I thought, how did he know that? How did he know I was thinking that? And I thought maybe this guy might be a bit psychic, you know? How people who are psychic, they can read your mind and fill in the gaps. I thought, maybe he's one of those psychics, you know? But he seemed to understand what I'd been like, you know? And the other thing that I couldn't quite get was when I said I'd like to join AA, I thought he would maybe go and get a form and say, you know, if you join before Thursday, you can get this attractive free sports bag, you know? Or would you like to put a deposit down? Or frankly, he acted like he couldn't give a shit whether I stopped drinking or not. I mean, he took me to a meeting, but he was sort of like not that impressed, you know? And it was really the first time I'd come in contact with an organisation that didn't seem to care whether I joined or not, you know? But he took me to a meeting the next day, and I heard my first chair, a guy speaking at a meeting, and I didn't know what to expect. We went into this little room in this Church of Scotland hall, and there were lots of little chairs. It was like a Sunday school for kids. Chairs were too small for the people, although the people were all very small as well. Partly because they were Scottish, and partly because they were extremely old. The average age was about 95. I think, you know, gravity does something to your spine. I don't know. They're all wee, little tiny men wearing raincoats. And me. And so this guy sat down to speak, and I could not believe this guy's story. Or what I could not believe was that anyone would tell other people the stuff that he was telling them. I was really shocked, you know, because he was so honest, and they were all laughing, and I thought they were laughing at the guy. At one point, I considered standing up and saying, look, give him a chance. Because I misunderstood the nature of the laughter. I thought the guy was being too honest. They're going, "Pah, you did that." You know, this guy spoke about, he told my story in a way. He'd been a pimp in Glasgow. He'd never travelled very much, but he was a pimp in Glasgow. His name was Alec, and he had a hearing aid, and he'd been a pimp. And I don't know if maybe the loss of hearing had meant he was pensioned out of the pimping, but he stopped pimping. And he was 4 years sober. And he talked about a lot of the things that I've talked about tonight, but he'd gone further than I had. He'd been drinking for a lot longer. He was in his early 50s, the guy. So he spoke about waking up in a psychiatric ward in the west of Scotland, and he was tied down on a bed, been strapped down on a bed, and he'd gone through the delirium tremens. So he was hallucinating, and he'd been screaming that night. And he said that this male nurse came into the room and pissed on him and said to him, "You fucking kept me awake all last night with your screaming, you bastard." Now that got my attention. That got my attention. I really have to tell you. You know, I'd seen one for the cuckoo's nest, and I thought, wait a minute. If all that other shit that I did, he did, and then he kept going, that's going to happen to me. And I didn't want that. You know, I didn't want to be the next guy tied down in the bed with a slightly older guy coming in and peeing on me, you know. It's a program of attraction rather than promotion. So, yeah, that got my attention. And I was taken to meetings by various people. One guy who took me to meetings was 6 months sober. And he to me was an old timer. He had a lot of time. He was 6 months. And he took me, I was coming off alcohol and other drugs, and I was very jumpy. And I said to him, I'm a bit afraid to stay on my own in this room I was staying in. And he said, well, you can come back. I'm going to my mum's tonight. You can come back and stay at my mum's house with me. He was visiting Glasgow from London. So we got off the bus where he lived, and he bought some cigarettes and a tin of spaghetti, and we went back to this guy's mother's house. And everything was a little sort of David Lynch because I was detoxing, you know. And we went into this house, and on the window was a sticker that said, "I am a window." And And on the radiator it said, I am a radiator, I am hot, do not touch me. And on the door it said, I am a door, please close me. And I'm getting really freaked out, you know, in this weird house. And it turned out his mother had Alzheimer's, and so they had all these stickers everywhere. She kept saying to me, what's your name? And I would say, Philip, and then she would say a minute later, what's your name? And I was like, oh my God. I should probably have been in a rehab, but anyway. Anyway, I'm sitting with this guy, and he's terrified of me, I found out later, you know. He's a little guy, and he's 6 months, and I'm all crazy, and I've got, 2 days. And so we're eating spaghetti. He bought this tin of spaghetti and heated it. And I looked at him, and I said to him, I've been thinking about stuff, and I said, how do the steps fit in with Freud's theories about the unconscious? And he kind of looked at me for a minute, and he said, just eat your spaghetti. And that's sort of been my recovery, I want to know about everything and understand it and read books on it, and really is just eat your spaghetti. Just do the next thing. Just keep one foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, I wanted to get all, I wanted to understand it before I did it, I wanted to understand it before I did it. And it doesn't work like that, I got a sponsor who was a guy I knew before I came in, and I did the steps with him, and I joined a group, and I went to a lot of meetings, and I thought I would never work again. I thought I would never hold down a job. I thought I would just live in these smoky little rooms, and I'd probably die of some passive smoking thing, and that would be my life. I thought my life would just stay sort of black and sort of grey, I felt my life, I was having to pay for all the fun I'd had, and really that's not been my experience, sobriety's been an amazing journey, I would like to emphasize the steps and getting some kind of higher power. I grew up with a very sort of idea of God that was sort of, God was a bastard, really, God's a bastard, and he's not in a good mood, and he's watching you, And so when anyone talked about God, I was like, where is he? It was sort of like God was just not, it wasn't a good thing, That was, I don't know if they meant it like that, but that was kind of what I heard anyway. And so I had to sort of redesign my ideas around God, and I had to think of God as maybe someone slightly less out to destroy me, and punish me and write it all down. Like a sort of driving instructor with a toothache or something. It was sort of, that was what I thought God was. But so I tried to have another idea of God, and that was helpful, That was helpful to have another idea of God. And I got really involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and through all this stuff, my life began to change. I got a part-time job, and I got another job, and I started to move back into society and just live and have a life. I've been sober for more than 24 years. 24 years and 3 or 4 months, and my life today is good. I do a job that I love. I'm married. I have 3 fantastic kids who fucking drive me mad a lot of the time. Sometimes I'd like to run away and hide, but you can't do that when you're their dad, really. I sponsor people. I have a home group. I have a commitment there. I have a sponsor. I've got a sponsor here and a sponsor in London, and I work with other people, and my life is great. My life is great. I've travelled. I've done all sorts of things that I would never have dreamed I would do. I had a sort of secret longing to be a writer when I was drinking. I once met a guy who was a writer, and I hated him because, like someone in a wheelchair who wanted to be a ballet dancer. I just looked at this guy and I thought, that bastard, I thought it wouldn't be possible for me to do that. And it's one of a number of ambitions. Like, I make a living principally from writing today, you know. And that is a great gift, you know. It's a great gift to do something that you love and to get paid for it, you know. It's a great gift, you know. What else can I tell you about this? You know, if you don't like me and it's your first meeting, just go to other meetings, you know. Just go to other meetings. I'm not AA, you know. Jeff's guy dropped out maybe, and he called me this morning. So don't think I'm AA, you know. I'm just like the guy tonight, and next week it'll be some other guy. And don't let if you had a bad holiday in Scotland, or you had an uncle with red hair that stole your candy, don't let me put you off, you know. At the very least, don't let me put you off AA, you know. My life is good today. You know, I'm reasonably contented. I'm not perfect, you know. I'm not perfect. I want to emphasize that. But I'm reasonably happy. You know, I've never regretted the decision to not drink, you know. I never woke up in the morning and thought, why did I stay sober last night? You know, I've never had any remorse around that decision. I've never had any remorse around that. I've never sort of come to and thought, oh man, I can't believe I stayed off it last night. You know? And yeah, my life is good. It's hard. It's hard if you're here and you're new and you're young. You know, it's hard to imagine it, but it's possible. It's possible. It's possible to get sober and live a very full life and have a lot of fun. And, you know, if I go out from here tonight and I have an accident, you know, I've had 24 very full years. Like someone else said, I've been awake in my own life, you know. I've been present in my own life, you know, and I've experienced a full range of emotions rather than just being terrified and manically excited, you know. But I'm running out of time, so thank you so much for listening so attentively.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.